Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I decided to do something a little bit different with my channel today. I want to have some kind of erudite experiences, some kind of cerebral book chat kind of experiences, because I really enjoy doing that with Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the last one that I did. And I thought, you know what, I don't really have any of those. And so I thought that would help me and maybe other people, because I know I'm very auditory and I really enjoy listening to people read a good book and read a good book well, because not that many people are skilled in that area. And I've just been so jazzed about the Library of Alexandria lately, which, if you know what it is, you know how terribly important it was and how awful it was that it burned to the ground. It was the repository of all knowledge everywhere in the ancient world. And so that's something that I wanted to talk about. And I wanted to add something to my channel that is a little more cerebral. So we're going to name this part of my channel Cerebral Book Chat. At least I think so. I kind of like that. And we're going to talk about books and ideas. And I hope that you'll join me as we do that. And, you know, have a chat with me even. Like, what do you think about the Library of Alexandria? What do you think happened to it? Do you think that it was very, very essential, and that because all those great and powerful works burned down, that we are set back now by so many centuries? Because they knew things before Christ that we don't even know now. Seriously, like there's some stuff that we have not been able to catch up with. And there are people who don't agree with that, but I absolutely think that was the case. Now, the sad part is it didn't even mean to happen. It didn't happen on purpose, right? So I thought we would talk about that, because that's just fascinating to me. And it's one of those things that if you're kind of brilliant, if you have kind of a more elevated IQ, you might worry about. And maybe you think about, maybe you don't, or maybe you just want to hear a good story because it's a fabulous story. Sad though, right? Because it does end up, you know, getting destroyed. And of course, papyrus, they go up in flames pretty easily, because I believe they're from the papyrus tree, if I remember. So I thought we would talk a little bit about the Library of Alexandria and some of the extraordinary things that went on, and then read some of this book, just the preface, really, of this extraordinary new book that I'm looking at. And I happened across the audiobook version, and my God, the speaker, he's like an angel. He speaks so very well. It's like, oh my God, it just makes your heart just jump up and down with glory and joy, because it's amazing. He deserves every good and perfect thing. The man speaks like the greatest person ever. So that's, at least in my book, somebody who speaks very well is very high indeed in my esteem, because I endeavor so much to be a good speaker. And so doing this, I want to see if I can get my speaking skills back up, because back in the day I used to teach public speaking. So I want to see if I can get mine back to where I want to go. And if I could speak like he could, oh my goodness. So it is from the book. Let me show you, well, at least tell you about it. Hang on again, here we are. It's called The Rise and Fall of Alexandria, Birthplace of the Modern World. Isn't that a good title? So we're not going to talk just about the Lighthouse of Alexandria, another very big wonder, and the Library of Alexandria, but all about sort of the city and everything, the area, you know, that kind of thing. So very, very powerful. They were wonders of the ancient world, right? Definitely. And of course, most of them are not there anymore. I think, yes, the Great Sphinx is still there. I believe it's the only one that's still existing. So we're going to talk about this book because it's so amazing. But first, I want to give you guys a bit of an update of what is the Library of Alexandria? What is happening? Why should we care? Well, I care because I want it to live. I want it to be alive for generations of people who don't know what it was. And I think, well, I can have a part in that. As they say so extraordinarily, something is never really gone if people talk about it. So, I don't know if that's the case, but I'm hoping to put that out here as that possibility. That it's not really gone if we talk about it. So, that's kind of the first thing. What is it? It is the biggest library that might have existed, certainly did exist for millennia, really. And even now the books we have they don't really rival those books in some ways. So it was actually created to be the greatest repository of higher learning that had ever happened. And that is what happened, right? It was part of a bigger institution called the Alexandrian Museum, of course, named for Alexander the Great, obviously, right? And so the library was used as research for the people who were at the university, one of the very first universities that had ever existed. So that was something. Apparently there was between 200,000 and 700,000 books in 2 library branches. So the main library, and then there was another library in a temple, sort of a bit of a ways in a temple. And they had so many different books. Again, we say books, but we actually mean scrolls, because that's what the Egyptians did for a very long time. They used papyrus, and it was in Egypt, right? So they had rhetoric and law and tragedy and comedy and poetry and history and medicine, if you can believe it, math, natural science, and miscellany. So they had all kinds of different things. And they were all actually organized according to their subject. So it must have been extraordinary to go there. I wish so much. If I had a genie, I'd be like, yeah, I want to go look at the Library of Alexandria. That's what I would. Well, one of the things I would ask for, there's plenty of other things I would ask for too. And you could actually, how they got books was they would buy them from other places, maybe, that had them, or they would borrow them from the ships in the harbor. Because of course it was a port area, so all the ships from the known world would travel there. It was a very big, bustling kind of area, and so the people, if there were any books, right, scrolls, they would be boarded, and then they would look to see if they had any, take them, and then get the scribes to sort of write them down and then give them back to them. So honestly, they did give them back. But that's how they managed to amass so many books from so many areas and so many different disciplines. It was amazing. Things that people didn't remember or didn't learn or didn't know for 1,000 years, right? All the things that we think now, a lot of them were being thought back then. Things like, the earth isn't the center of the universe. Although there are people who still think that. And that blood does flow through the body. And just amazing different things that we know now. But you wouldn't expect somebody in prehistory almost to actually know, right? But they did. They had Socrates, they had Plato, they had all the great works of Greek literature, all like Homer, all the other amazing plays. I think they might have had Sophocles. So, that's amazing, right? They had lots of different things from lots of different places. So that was something that was quite amazing. It was, the main language were Greek, of course, and Egyptian, which apparently doesn't exist anymore, but did. And also, I believe either they were translated into Latin or some of them were in Latin. We're not exactly sure about that because I think some of them might have been in Latin as well. And there was so much about ancient Greece because, of course, back then it wasn't ancient, right? So lots of different things. And they had scholars, and the scholars would work there. Oh, to be a scholar in the Library of Alexandria, right? Okay, who wants to do that? Put it in the chat or the comments, right? So, okay, let's get to the heartbreaking part. Julius Caesar was waging a war, I believe, with other parts of Egypt, because he, of course, was Roman, and it wasn't going well, apparently, so he set fire to the boats in the harbor, and thinking not thinking that anything would happen other than that, well, the fire spread, and it spread to parts of the city, and it eventually spread to the Library of Alexandria, burning it to the ground, because, of course, there were no firefighters back then. And it was papyrus, which is basically paper and wood, right? So that's the heartbreaking thing. They were able to save a few books, but not very many, right? Not very many books. So that's the sad part. But it did last for a really long time. In its heyday, it was definitely there for, I believe, a few centuries. At least. So there were people that got to see this, got to use it, got to enjoy it. So we're going to read, I believe it's the preface from The Rise and Fall of Alexandria. And I'm going to use my best, erudite voice. We're going to see what happens here. I'm going to try and see if I could do half as good a job as the guy that was actually, it's on Amazon. Audible audiobooks, amazing. Man, you want to keep listening to him. He's so good. So I'm going to do my best with it. So, preface. Flotsam. Antiquities are history defaced, or some remnants of history which have casually escaped the shipwreck of time. Francis Bacon, The Advancement of Learning. On most days, in the summer of A.D. 1295, and it is A.D., whatever you might think. So, an Eastern Orthodox monk called Maximus Planudes, I think it's Planudes, could have been found in the great market of Constantinople, making his way past the spice sellers and the silk traders to the dusty undercrofts, where the book merchants piled their own wares in tottering stacks of parchment. Here were the codices and manuscripts in Arabic, Syriac, Greek, and Latin. Some newly completed, some old, holy books for all religions, practical treatises, histories, and chronologies. Here, too, were books still waiting to be written, fresh blank sheets and old volumes that had been scrubbed clean of whatever they had once held, ready for a new text. Walking along the waterfront to the great market, Maximus Planudes might have been reminded of the description in the Strabo of Alexandria in the 1st century A.D., which excitedly called the greatest emporium in the whole world. Okay, it might be A.D., it might just be early A.D., but I've read other things that said it also existed a bit in B.C. time. So either way, it was a long time ago. Constantinople, despite the sack of 1204, had since taken on the mantle, which was why this diminutive monk was spending each day of a hot summer there searching through piles of books and manuscripts. The booksellers must have taken careful note of this unusual creature in their midst. Monks swarmed the city, but their interest in books was invariably limited to medieval Greek religious works. The biblical glosses and commentaries, the credulous hagiographies, the missals, the psalters, and the breviaries, whose attraction was as much in the artistic illumination of their pages as in the illuminating quality of their text. But Planudes was after something different. He spent his hours poring over the dreariest looking texts, from faded Latin fragments to terse Arabic treatises. Then one day, sometime that summer, he found it. It certainly wasn't much to look at, but there in his hands was a fragment from the wreckage, a rare treasure, finally washed up on a distant shore. He had found Claudius Ptolemy's great lost work on geography, Geographia, written in ancient Alexandria, stored for centuries in her library, and believed, at least in the West, to have perished there. So you can imagine just that one papyrus, and they had 200,000 papyrus. So you want to know what was on them? You want to know? Rumors had been circulating in Europe that a copy had been seen in Arabic translation, just as Ptolemy's other great work was already known to Arabic scholars as the greatest, or in their language, Almagest. Now, here was his companion. The rumors were true. The survival of this masterful text was a small miracle in and of itself. The original copies of the Geographia had been deposited in the Library of Alexandria by Claudius Ptolemy himself, and there they had remained in constant use for centuries. It appears that sometime in the 4th century, however, a copy was made to take to the new Roman capital, Constantinople. When the Library of Alexandria was destroyed, this copy thus survived. Now, ironically, the very zealotry that had condemned so many of Alexandria's books would save it. When the Patriarch of Alexandria had the Patriarch of Constantinople declared a heretic, his followers had taken this copy of the Geographia with them into their desert exile. There, it had been translated into Syriac and then later Arabic. The original copy had, of course, long since perished, but a few of those Arabic translations survived. The last of those, then, somehow found its way into a bookseller's stock and was now in Maximus Plinides' hands. The copy of the Geographia the monk now so fiercely bartered for was not complete, at least not in the way he had wished it to be, for there was a text, but no maps. We cannot now be sure that Ptolemy's original version even had maps, but that was what Maximus Plinides wanted. And having secured his prize, he returned to the monastery at Chora, where he began the painstaking task of noting all the details in the text and turning them back into the thing he craved, a series of maps. Soon a new rumor was flying around the Mediterranean. Plinides had a map of the world. Ptolemy's map of the world. The story came to the ears of the Byzantine Emperor Andronicus II, Pelagius, who ordered a copy made for himself. Soon others were reconstructing, dividing, and improving the maps. By the 14th century, the 26 maps of the original version had been divided into 64, and one of these copies was obtained in 1400 by the Florentine patron Palestrozzi, who persuaded a Byzantine scholar to translate the work from Plinides' Greek into Latin. Now the Geographia could at last be read by the academics of Europe, who, thanks to Christianity, retained their knowledge of Latin, but had become increasingly ignorant of Greek. This version, finally finished around 1410, came into the royal courts of Europe at a time when interest in the exploration of the world, an interest that had slept for so long, was finally being rekindled. But none of the Renaissance princes who collected these wonders were more passionate than the Pope. If there were new lands to discover, then the papacy wanted to ensure that Catholicism traveled there with the explorers. So the little book that Plinides had discovered years before made its way to the Apostolic Library at the Vatican, along with many of its lavishly illustrated descendants. From the Vatican, copies would then be sent out across Europe. one of those would change the world. So that's the beginning of, I believe it's called The Rise and Fall of Alexandria, birthplace of the modern world. So that was quite an extraordinary book. So do leave a comment in the comment section if you wonder about Alexandria too. What do you think happened to the Library of Alexandria? And wouldn't it be wonderful if somehow we could go there? What would you look up? I know what I would look up. So thank you for joining me today for our first Cerebral Book Chat. And there'll be plenty more. Bye, everybody.